Episode number 25 with Scott Woods. I've known Scott for a very long time. Good friend, and he's a great fiddle player, one of the best out there. He's been touring with his show across Canada and the United States for several years now. And we sat down and chatted about his life and how he got to where he is now. And I think it's a really great listen. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right, we are rolling with Scott Woods. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, great.
Thanks for taking a drive on this nice icy day.
That's right.
Welcome to Canadian winters in Ontario. No snow, just lots of ice.
Yes.
Laneway was great.
As long as you keep it between the ditches.
I know.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. So I thought maybe we'd go back and chat about how you got started back in the day. I know we both started early. Did you start in classical?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, like you, my family, of course, was very involved in music, and my dad even grew up. His dad played fiddle, and unusual in those days, back in the early 30s. There was actually a violin teacher just down the street from where my dad lived in Fergus.
Oh, yeah.
And so his parents gave my dad legit violin lessons, classical violin lessons. And so Dad formed a band when he was 12 and played his first old-time dance.
Yeah.
And in 1956, Dad's orchestra needed a new piano player. And a young gal who was only about 16 years old at that time, named Carolyn, had been studying classical piano, but her grandfather was quite a well-known fiddler, a champion, not a champion, but one in the top 8 prizes at the Shelburne Fiddle Contest in the early years, 51, 52 maybe. His name was Charlie Dyer, and his granddaughter, Carolyn, could play classical music, but also learned to chord to fiddle tunes. So she was hired as the new piano player for Merv Wood's orchestra.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's how my mom and dad met. Cool. And 4 or 5 years later, they got married.
Yeah.
And 4 of us kids came along. So we were all given classical lessons in violin and piano and all the history, harmony, counterpoint, all the theory stuff as well. Because mom and dad both knew that the classical foundation really was important to build whatever type of music you wanted to play, whether it's jazz or old-time fiddle or classical or whatever.
Yeah.
And so
Did
we
you start Suzuki method at all?
It wasn't Suzuki, no. Yeah. I started actually with the same lady that lived down the street that taught my dad.
Oh, no way.
By the time I started, she was getting on in age.
Yeah.
And I was only 4. So she lived in Guelph at that time, and I would go for lessons. And she'd set her bow on top of the piano. And then she'd look around and she couldn't find her bow. And I would just giggle. I wouldn't say where it was.
Yeah.
And then she'd find her. She'd put her glasses up on her forehead, and then she couldn't find her glasses. And so I was only with her for a short time, and then I moved over to Dorothy Pierce in Kitchener, Ontario.
Yeah.
And Dorothy was a very strict classical teacher. Doug McNaughton also studied with her.
Yeah.
Great teacher. But she was very classical, very strict about technique, and really made us proud. I came out of there crying more times than not, I think, when I was just 5 or 6 years old. But she was really, really good at setting up that foundation of how to play. And we did the Kiwanis Music Festivals and the Royal Conservatory exams. All of us, my brother and my 2 sisters, we all went through that whole process. And in the meantime, as a reward for practicing the technique, if you practice your scale 10 times and perfectly, I'll teach you a jig or reel, Dad would say.
Oh, yeah.
So we'd learn the fun stuff from Dad. And, of course, Mom and Dad still had the orchestra. They were playing every weekend an old-time dance somewhere, and we did concerts and a lot of dances back in those days. This is in the early 70s and late 70s. And so I joined the band when I'm the youngest, so I was about 8 years old, I think. And I played fiddle, but then I started playing drums. And over the years, my brother and my sister played saxophone. I did too for a while, played bass, guitar, whatever was needed.
Yeah.
You know what that's like.
Yeah.
We got to learn them all.
Yeah.
If the guitar player is not available, you better be able to sit in and do something, or bass or drums or whatever. And so it was a great upbringing. We learned a lot from my dad about tempo and dance feel. You can't play a schottische that fast. It's not, you can't dance to it.
Yeah.
Or if you play it too slow, or if you play your waltzes, it's got to have the right flow in order, to get people up on the floor. And you learned if you started something and it was not the right tempo, the floor didn't fill up.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we played a lot of dances when we were young too, and it was or it still is to some degree a different beast than just playing.
Yeah,
you had to think about. It's funny when you mentioned a schottische. I haven't played one of those in years. We used to do that.
Yeah.
Probably hardly anyone would know what that is nowadays. And yeah, you'd have to really think about the flow of what you're going to do next. And there were always those songs every once in a while. I'd always think that after lunch, they used to have, around 11 o'clock, whatever that ended up being. I don't know why they ended up calling lunch, because it was always 11 o'clock at night.
Exactly.
Should have been a midnight snack or something. We're going to have lunch now. I'm thinking, what? But I always found it was hard to get people on the dance floor right after they had their meal. So we always had, those 1, 2, 3, or 4 numbers.
Yes.
And I know for us, what was it? It was Hardix by the Number, I think.
Yep.
Old Country Classic, or
we did Crystal Chandelier.
Yes,
that was always a good one.
Crystal Chandelier was the other one. That same with us. That song was just always.
There was always a few that you knew if you played that one and nobody got up on the floor, then they're not going to get up ever. You might as well just pack up and go home.
Yeah, and I think of it now as being 6 years old, playing Crystal Chandeliers and getting people up on the floor, and then 30 years later, maybe it's 40 years, who knows? But you end up working with Charlie Pride, and it's weird how you think when you're young, and then many years later, you get a chance to meet or see the people the music that you played. So so that's very much like our family, like myself, started playing at 4. I didn't take classical too long, but I started with that. So do you think, I always ask this question to fiddle players, because some people are really stickler about technique and other people aren't. Now that you're kind of older, how do you think about technique now? Does it, in your mind, does it mean as much, or?
Yeah, I'm one of those sticklers.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think even I don't teach as much now as I used to. 15 years ago, I had a lot of students, like even back, I was still competing up until the 2003 or 4 or 5, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And in those days, I had a lot of students. Like I worked with Mark Sullivan and Lindsay and Tyler Beckett, Kyle Sharon, all the Fitzgeralds from Bancroft. Just a whole bunch of great fiddlers. I had students from Sudbury and lots down around Oshawa, Peterborough, that way, London and Chatham, Sarnia way. I had a few from New York State and Pennsylvania that come up every other week for a lesson.
Wow.
So my approach was always based on technique. And I would always say, if you're doing something that's not perhaps right, and it was always about posture and relaxation and bow grip, the geometry of the elbow on the bow arm, and keeping the elbow high but the shoulder relaxed to get that sort of smooth flow in the bow, to the point that you can play smooth and light and very gentle, but at the same time you can play fast and aggressive because you're not tightening the whole arm up moving. And I would say to them, if there is an issue that I see, it might not stop you from playing, because there's lots of fiddle players that don't have great technique and they're much more successful than I am. But they will be limited at some point. They might want to play a different style or a tune or a piece or a section of a tune that they just can't play in that speed.
Yeah.
or they just can't play as smoothly as somebody else that they want to. And that hurdle, they just won't be able to get over because of their technique. So I would always try and get back to that basics and really, pound that in, that the technique. So we worked a lot, and my approach was kind of like my dad's. Like, we work on the technique.
Yeah.
And most of my students were fiddle students, so they were competing. And so they were working on their waltz, jig, and reel for the contest, and a lot of them were recording and playing other shows, country music or Celtic or whatever. So we would work on those tunes as well, but we would always bring it back to what you need to get this section of the tune perfected is, let's work on Kreutzer number 3
Yeah.
or Kreutzer number 14 or whatever exercise or Schradiak or whatever the study that would affect that particular piece of music.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, especially when you put it that way. That's probably explained the best way yet. I always say I think it's a really great foundation, and I always kind of came from the school. It's like, I think to some degree you get that foundation, it makes sense, and then I think everybody has their own slight different way of getting there. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think the technique is really, really important. And as you mentioned, it will limit you in some purposes, but I think everyone's shaped differently. Everyone's
absolutely,
everyone's a little quirkier, and everyone's not built exactly the same.
Well, the example I often use is that Graham Townsend, who was more or less self-taught. He was legally blind. He couldn't read music. He couldn't see it, couldn't understand it to read music, really.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff that was written, Elner would transcribe for him,
yeah,
or somebody else. And Graham was a brilliant player, obviously. But did he not have technique? Well, no, he had great technique. But how did he learn it? Well, he listened to recordings, and he worked with Don Messer, and he worked with all these different great fiddlers of the past. And he listened to the way they played, and then he tried to hit, and I guess it might not have been a straight line. It might have been a roundabout way to get to the end result, but he still got there.
Yeah.
And I think the technique just kind of streamlines that route so that you get a little faster to the left hand agility or the right hand mobility or whatever it is that you're working on technical wise.
Yeah, makes sense. So going back, you were playing dances and doing that with the family, and how long did you do that for? Did that kind of carry you through your high school years? Yeah.
I basically put myself through university and a business degree in weekend gigs with the family band, and then I played a lot of gigs with other groups. I played with a group out of St. Catharines called the Bay Boys, Newfoundland music, for on and off for over 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And learned a lot of great music with those guys. They were a lot of fun. Sadly, both of the brothers, Les and Freddie Northcott, have passed away, but I really enjoyed the time working with them. And I did a lot of the other big country shows. There was one called the All-Star Country Tribute Show, and I forget who else now. There's a bunch of people that I had worked with through high school and early university days. And it was really a great experience because I played modern country and old country and bluegrass and some blues and rock, and most of it was fiddle by that point, but I was still playing a fair bit of drums.
Yeah.
And I was recording, and competing, of course, during the summertime. That was my main summer job.
Yeah, that take most. What was your first? Do you remember your first contest?
Yes, 1979 Shelburne, or Bob Cajun rather.
Okay.
I did go to Shelburne that year, but Bob Cajun was a couple of weeks before, at the end of July, and I had been to the contests for a year or so. But back in those days, it was kind of you don't compete unless you can play pretty good already.
Yeah.
And so I had been playing for 3 or 4 years, but I could play waltz, jig, and reel, but my parents didn't think I was quite ready. So nowadays, if you can get up there and just hold the fiddle up and move the bow across the string, they say, yeah, you go in the 8 and under class, you get something, right?
Yeah.
But in those days, they didn't do it. And so Bob Cajun was the first time that I actually competed. I was 8. And I remember my aunt, she told me, well, if you play well, maybe you'll get a trophy or something. But, you know, you should go up there and try your best. And if you play well, I'll give you $20. 1979, $20 was a lot of Kawartha dairy ice cream.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So sure enough, I played. In fact, I remember, so I have 2 sisters. My oldest sister, Elizabeth, is a doctor. And then Kendra, the next one, is now touring with me. She's a retired school teacher, but teaching music for 31 years.
Yeah.
And so they're like 2 different people. So Liz is scholarly type, went to medical school, always reading, very, very smart. Kendra was more, wanted to deal with the little kids. And so Kendra is like, don't worry, you're going to go up and compete your first contest. You'll be fine. Don't worry, it's going to be great. It's a fun experience. And my oldest sister, Liz, says, you better not mess it up because we have a reputation, you know. And I'm 8 years old looking at her going, okay. Anyways, I remember playing and I came down and I happened to be the youngest fiddler. And so I got a trophy. And so I went down to my aunt and I said, well, I played and I got a trophy. Where's my $20? So sure enough, she coughed up the $20 and I ate $20 worth of Kawartha dairy ice cream that whole weekend at Bob Cajun.
That's awesome. My grandpa used to bribe me with 20s every once in a while. I can't even remember now what it before. I'm sure my sister would tell me because she always get mad because I always got the money. But yeah, I remember one of them was when I was young. I never smile on stage.
Oh yes,
and my grandpa would always say, "Well, if you smile on the show, I'll give you $20."
Yeah.
And I would like smile for like a second.
You got the Donnie Reed smile.
Yeah, real quick. And then I get my $20.
That's the fiddle contest thing, though. That not smiling thing.
Is it?
Yeah. Because you're so focused. And you and I both grew up, competing in those contests. Yeah. And the judge is sitting down there and they're listening and they're looking up for any little scratch or any little imperfection. And you're up there just focused in your own little bubble about not worrying about what else is going on in those old arenas and flies buzzing around and all the distractions, and you're just like playing your waltz, jig, and reel. And so when you start playing shows, it's a whole different beast at all to smile and entertain. And I find it very difficult to be animated when I'm playing.
Oh yeah,
singing or talking, no problem. But when I'm playing, I'm still a bit of a stone face.
Just go back to it. Yeah,
yeah, it's just natural.
So you obviously did contests for a long time. You mentioned to mid 2003, 4,
somewhere in there, yeah.
And I know you were really successful at that. You won a lot of awards. And what were some of your highlights during that?
I was really lucky. When I was 11 or 12, I started to win a lot of the 12 and under classes, and I loved going to the contests. 1 year, I'm not sure how old I was. Around that age, though, I think there was 35 contests I got to in 1 year. Wow. Now, a lot of those are little fair contests, one-off things. And sometimes there's 2 or 3 on a weekend, so you can go on a Thursday night to one, and a Friday to another one, a Saturday to another one, Sunday, you might pick up another one. And they were little, but they were great experience builders. And I've always said that about the fiddle contest. First of all, it forces you to stand in front of the audience, and you get that nervousness. Like, people always dreading public speaking or being in front of an audience. Well, when you stand up there and play the fiddle, it's the same thing. Yeah, you're under the microscope. You're not speaking, but you're playing. It's basically the same experience. Your heart rate goes up, and you soon learn to deal with that and use that as your friend. And that adrenaline, that little butterflies that you get in your stomach, can give you a little edge. Yeah. And really focus all your attention on exactly what you do. You live in the moment right then and there, where lots of other times, if you're just playing a show or whatever, you can wander. Your mind gets off. You're wondering, what's that guy doing over there? What's happening with this? Or why is the guitar player playing that chord? But the fiddle contest really focus you in on that. And the other thing is that you learn very quickly at a young age that you don't always win. Yeah. I don't know how many times I competed and I won, and I knew in my heart I didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
I knew somebody else played better.
Yeah.
And I didn't play my best, and I was almost embarrassed that I was getting the trophy. And I remember I always took it very humbly, and I would say thank you, and I congratulate all of my other competitors. And the same thing happens. There's lots of times you deserve to win, and you know in your heart you did, and you don't get it. Somebody else does. And you take that just as humbly, and you say congratulations, and you do it with a smile, and you shake their hands, and you move on. And that's a good life lesson, because, there's a lot of competition in life, growing up to get into the schools that you want and to get the affection of another person, to be the love in your life or whatever, to get that job promotion. Everybody's got competition. Even just to merge in the lane of traffic on the 401 is a bit of a competition some days. So you always learn that you don't always win. And so I was really, really lucky. And I won a lot of those contests in the 11 and 12 years old in the 12 and under class. I won Shelburne, the big one, I guess, in 1983. I was 12.
Yeah.
And then I moved into the 18 and under class. I worked my way through there. And I think in 87, I had won the 18 and under class. I was 16. I also had won that year, the third year in a row, for the Novelty.
Oh, yeah.
Where I do the tricks. And then got into the open class right after that when I was 17. And I had won Pembroke 3 or maybe 4 times. I think when I was about 17, I started winning in Pembroke. And I still couldn't win Shelburne in the open class until 93. I was 22.
Yeah.
And won the first time there, and then again in 96. And then the Canadian Grandmasters, I think that was 98 and 99. So I was very, very fortunate to most of the major competitions across the country, and several in the States as well. I was very, very fortunate.
Who was, who would, I wouldn't say competition, but who were the ones you were playing against mostly at, like, in the Open? Like, I know I did contests. I think my last one was when I was 12. I've told the story once before, but roughly, I think it's the Royal Winter Fair or something like that. There was a little fiddle contest. And it's 12 and under, and I think I was just around 12. And there's 4 of us, and 3 got into the finals. Long story short, I didn't. And there's a girl who got in, and she stopped and she cried, and she made another mistake and stopped and had to restart and cried again, and that whole thing. And she got in and I didn't. So, and I played fine. I was no issues. So on the way home, I remember the drive home, and I remember sitting in the back of the car. I remember my mom and dad in the front. And for me, for some reason, I decided, I had enough of that. And that one single contest made my decision not to do it anymore, which was fine for me because I had a bunch of other interests that it was actually, I think for me, it was probably a good thing because it led me a bunch of different areas. But at that time, I was with the Schreier triplets. Yes. And Danelle Leahy. So that there was like 5 of us. I think there's someone else in there. And that was like, I don't say it was stiff. It made me work really hard. I remember, it's like, if I could just even, get second, that'd be awesome. Yeah. But, I'd win a couple times and then they'd win a lot. And then it was like a rotation of all of us. But yeah, they were all monsters at a young age. And quite amazing now. I mean, they have, I haven't seen the Schreiers in a long, long, long time, but Danelle I've run into a few times. And
great players, all of them. And
all different.
And you're right. They would push each other because, in fact, the Schreier's parents come to our show when we play in Sault Ste. Marie still.
Oh, great.
And I usually recognize, if I see them in the audience, I'll recognize them and acknowledge that they're in the audience. And I would say, the triplets, they're a little bit older than me, so they're always better. because I
Yeah.
was just a couple of years younger than them. And but I said we kind of had this love-hate relationship because when we were on the stage, we were fierce competitors. We'd do anything to be the winner that day.
Yeah.
But then we come off, and 5 minutes after they announced the winners, we didn't care. It didn't matter. It was just a fiddle contest anyways, right? Yeah. It didn't matter. And we'd be off in the park jamming, playing tunes, learning tunes from each other, hanging out, just kids playing, having fun. And I think that was the social part that you saw the same people every week. And then you go home and practice like crazy to do better the next weekend. But you're right. I mean, I was competing with all those guys, the Schreier triplets, Louis and Dan and Pierre. And Robbie Dagenet came onto the scene, I would have been about 15 or so, I think. He was in the 18 under class when I first ran into Robbie. And Todd Thompson from Petrolia. And then Ian Hamilton joined the scene as well from London. There was Suzanne Tellier from Hamilton. Mm-hmm. David Jones from London used to show up sometimes. He was a little bit younger than me. Who else was in the contest? There was just a whole bunch. So when I got into the open class, that's pretty much who I was. And even Raymond Schreier was still competing the odd time, and Michelle Lubinecki and Karen Reed. Yeah. I mean, years ago, there was Kevin Rager and Dwight Lubinecki as well.
Yeah, I remember.
Some of these names from the past that they're kind of the ones. Donnie Reed, of course. I remember watching Donnie win 3 years in a row at Shelburne, 1980, 81, and 82. Yeah. And Chuck Joyce was still competing.
Oh, yeah. Remember Chuck.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's lots of them. I mean,
it was, and every weekend was different because you go to the Ottawa Valley and you might have a few more from that area that you don't normally see in southwestern Ontario. But down here, there was lots of different fiddlers as well. So,
yeah. What it was like when you're in high school, you probably end up playing every weekend, were you? Lots of times.
Yeah.
My high school life was, I didn't end up doing many of the parties or socializing outside of high school. A lot, because, well, one, we lived in the middle of the country, but we played every weekend.
Yeah.
So
same thing.
We're gone.
Yep. Yeah. We were gone. Well, in the summertime, we were gone usually Thursday night or Friday morning to a fiddle contest somewhere, or if we weren't at a contest, we were playing a show.
Yeah.
And we'd get home Sunday late afternoon sometime. We had the trailer, and we'd load the van up with the gear, and away we go and stay somewhere in the trailer at the fiddle contest. And then my buddies were playing ball or lacrosse, or we didn't have a football team in my high school, but fiddle playing is not the coolest of things to do when you're a young guy, as you know. But I just say, well, it's fine. I'm making money every weekend, and you guys are just out playing and having fun. And at the end of the day, I'm going to have something to show for this, and you guys are just going to be playing ball and having fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember when I was in high school, I didn't know what people thought. I didn't really care. I was very much a part of the music department in high school, and I actually really hardly ever played the violin in high school. I played sax. I played sax too. So I spent, I think, most of my time playing sax. Mm-hmm. And we had our family had a TV show on at the time. So I didn't realize until much later what anyone thought. And then I think near the end of high school, every once in a while I get someone who would come up and say, "Hey, yeah, we watch you every week on TV." And it's like, "You do?" It was like, I was shocked because I didn't think that anyone cared or knew or even thought it would maybe slightly cool, right? Yeah. But I think when you're in high school, you just I kind of always put it aside, and I didn't really ever talk about it. I was gone, and I think everyone just knew, and that was it. No one really said anything to me. I never really said anything to them, and we just kept going. That seemed to be the way it went.
Yeah.
So eventually you finish up your university. Mm-hmm. So what was it that you said?
I took marketing, actually. Marketing? I went to Brock University and took marketing, and it was interesting because when I was signing up for university, I had no idea really what I wanted to do. Yeah. And at that time, I didn't want to play music for a living. My goal was to not have to take it out of the box to eat.
Yeah.
And, you know, in those days, I was still playing with a bunch of bands, and I had played some bars. I didn't like them.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, if this is what the music business is going out on a, you know, Friday and Saturday night and play until 2:00 in the morning to a bunch of drunks, and you know, then packing up and getting home at 4 or 5 in the morning with smoke in your eyes and you can't see and can't go to sleep, then I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I did apply to music at Laurier, and I did apply to Western for science because I liked chemistry and I liked physics and math and that kind of stuff, which is actually not that uncommon with musical people, I guess.
Yeah.
They're very related. But I didn't really want to be a science teacher, and I didn't want to work in a lab. So my oldest sister Liz went that route. She went chemistry at Western first, and then got into medical school and became a doctor. Kendra went the other way, and she did the music, but then went to teacher's college and was a teacher. Yeah. My brother took business, so I thought, well, I should maybe do that. And my parents had a real estate business. Again, a generation thing. My grandfather started the real estate business in Fergus in 1919, and then Dad got in 54, and my mom had her CRA appraisal designation. So they were busy all through, even when the early 80s, when the market was very depressed. They weren't selling a lot of houses, but my mom was busy with appraisals for the banks because there was a lot of foreclosures and refinancing and all of that kind of stuff. And that kept us going. And so I thought, well, that might be a good gig because, you know, my dad did that and then he played on the weekends. So there's still an opportunity to keep music. I wanted to keep music in my life. I just didn't want to have to play.
Yeah.
So I went to Brock for marketing, and I realized at university that a lot of the business education was geared towards corporate, big business, you know, starting in the mailroom and working your way up through middle management. And by the time you're 55, you're upper middle management and you're ready to retire and you get this package. And I'm like, well, that's not really, I don't want to work in the city and live in a, you know, high rise kind of building, working all day and driving in that commuter traffic. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be independent. And so I immediately got my real estate license, my broker's license. And my brother had got his and was working with Dad in the real estate. And so I did as well. And I was actually really, really successful at that. I enjoyed it. And I felt I was too young because I thought I was young. I was like, you're 20 years old or whatever, 21. And you're trying to sell a house in those days that was $100,000 or $150,000. And like, who's going to trust a 20-year-old with this kind of an investment?
Yeah.
And my dad told me, he says, well, don't worry so much about how old you are. He said, just know your stuff. Research it. Know what you're talking about. Don't give them any nonsense. Don't give them the hard sale stuff. Just try and help the people either sell their house if that's what they're trying to do, or buy a new house if that's what they're trying to do. Give them the options, show them. And he said the rest will just fall into place. And he was absolutely right. Yeah. If you don't worry about your commission and only worry about helping the people. So I did that for quite a while, and I was still teaching on, you know, in the evenings and on the weekends, still playing a lot, recording, and I was really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
If I had stuck with real estate, I still have my broker's license, but I mean, if I had stuck just doing that primarily, I'd be probably in a lot better position financially than I am right now playing the fiddle. But I guess about 98 is where things really started to change for me. I had done a show with Tommy Leadbeater at the Wingham Theatre, and that was with Gary and Janice Balla. And Tommy is just crazy. He is an absolute entertainer. He is nuts. He's just fun on the stage, great singer, great pipes. Like he's just and just a real energetic soul.
Yeah.
And so we kind of hit it off, and his manager at the time was Barbara Martin. Mm-hmm. And Barbara was sitting at the back of the hall that day when a show was on. It was a variety show, and Tommy and I were both guests. And she was talking to my dad. They were sitting there selling the CDs. And she said, well, I do this show called Memories of Don Messer's Jubilee. and we tour across the country. Graham Townsend was involved from the beginning of that show, and it started in 1995, honoring the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II. And Don Messer's radio show was broadcast to the troops overseas during World War II. It was the only broadcast of its kind, I guess, on shortwave radio.
Yeah.
It was the only broadcast that was not of a, pure news-oriented program. It was a little piece of home. It was a 15-minute broadcast that they sent, so the boys over there could get a little taste of home.
Yeah.
Because he was on CBC coast to coast on the radio in those days, twice a week. So it sounded like home when they heard Don Messer and the Islanders. So she thought it was an appropriate show to pay tribute. So she had Don Tremaine come back, the original host. Vic Mullen, who was, of course, the five-string banjo player, and he played fiddle and guitar. He had been on the TV show from about the late 66 or 7 or so until the end. And who else? They had a group of 8 dancers, some of them original booked dancers or kids of the booked dancers.
Yeah.
It was a really big production. Johnny Forrest was another one she had. And so she put this show together, and it toured, and it was very successful. And a couple of weeks after the show that we did in Wingham, Barbara called my dad and said, "We need a piano player for the Don Messer tribute show. We're going out on the road in the fall, and there's only about 12 dates in Ontario just. And the piano player that they had couldn't go or whatever. Graham Townsend suggested that my mom would be the best piano player because she can play fiddle tunes, but she can also do the songs. And it's a whole different, it's a whole different style to play for songs than it is just chording to tunes. So that's great. My mom got the gig first.
Oh, yeah.
And then a week or so later, Barb called and said to my dad, I have an unusual request. I need an understudy for Graham. Graham was sick with cancer at that time. It's the fall of 98. And she said, he thinks he can do the tour, but I'm worried because, she was playing the Sanderson Center and the Showplace and like the bigger theaters. I think we played Centennial Hall in London, and she had big crowds, and people were coming expecting a show. And she said, I can't show up, and then Graham's not feeling well and can't play or collapses in the middle of the show because he's weak.
Yeah.
So I need an understudy that can go learn the show, take the rehearsals so that Graham doesn't have to, and rehearse the band, and basically be a band leader, but be off stage.
Yeah.
And so, and also you have to be a stage manager.
Yeah.
And I remember in the background going, no. And Dad's like, yeah, no, I think Scott would be very interested in that. I'll talk to him. And he gets off the phone, and I'm like, no, I don't want to be a stage manager. I don't want to be off the stage. I have no interest in that. Anyways, Dad talked me into it. He said, listen, Graham suggested that you are the guy. If all of the fiddlers that he knew in the country, if he picked you to be the guy that could play the style of Don Messer, then that's a real honor. And don't disrespect him by saying no. You just go and do this thing. So anyways, I negotiated with Barb, and I said, okay, I'll do the stage manager thing, and I'll write the charts, and I'll rehearse the band, and I'll be a band leader. But I said, I would like to play. Mm-hmm. So she said, well, there is a couple of spots in the show that we normally have a twin fiddle thing where Don and Cease McEachran would play together. Yeah. So I said, well, I'll do that. I'll play harmony to Graham. Okay, I'll have to check with Graham. So she checked with Graham, and Graham, sure enough, said, oh, yes, that'd be great. I know Scott. He'd be just wonderful to play harmony to. So that's great. So that's how I got on that gig, and we did our run. Graham played every show but one, and we had a double show. It is in Brampton at the old theater downtown. I forget what it's called. And
it's the Rose now, or
yes. Mm-hmm. So we had an afternoon show and an evening show, and Graham was pretty tired. It was I think it was the last day of the show, actually. Mm-hmm. And so he asked if I would play the afternoon show, and he would sit out front and critique the show and offer me and Barb feedback on what to do to keep the show going in the future. It was a very, very popular show.
Yeah.
And then he played the evening show. And 10 days later, I was playing at Graham's funeral. in Barrie.
Jeez.
Like, that's how close it was to the end. That was his last big, it was his last tour and his last big performance. He did do a couple of small jam session gigs after that, but he was pretty weak. Like, he was thin, his face was drawn, like he just wasn't himself. Mind you, that night, the second show that day in Brampton, the last night of the tour, he played as good as I've ever heard him play.
Wow.
You know, and I had recorded on the last album that he played. I played drums on it, and I also played twin fiddle with him on that. That would have been earlier that year, in the summertime probably, or early fall. And he was still playing great. And that night he played as super. He played also at the Grand Masters as a guest that year in the fall, and had played drums for him on that show. But it was such a shame. He was 56, I'm going to say, something like that.
Yeah.
But
he was fantastic. I recorded his 101 Fiddle Hits CD.
Yes, that's a great album.
Yeah, it's I'm not even sure if I have a copy around. I got to take a look, but it was crazy. He just like 101 fiddle tunes.
Yeah.
I don't know 101 fiddle tunes.
Yeah. He was an encyclopedia. He knew not only the tune and how to play it and, you know, the key and everything, but he knew who recorded it, when they recorded it, what label they recorded on, where the tune came from originally, who did a variation of it and played it in a different key or did some crazy thing to that tune. Like, he knew all about that tune. Yeah. You know, and I guess that's what it is if that's your life. Like, he was basically a genius when it came to fiddle tunes.
Yeah, well, you just kind of lived in and breathed fiddle tunes and playing the fiddle. I mean, it was just so much a part of him. I really miss him. And nice guy and fun guy to hang out with too. He's crazy. Yeah,
he liked the spotlight. He liked those. He had those big neon jumpsuits with the sequins and everything. And him and Elner would come out and play, and it was good though. I mean, he was on the road with Wilf Carter and Stompin' Tom and all these big guys. He had done a lot, and I was pretty young. I was playing drums for him once in Belmore for a dance, and I think Phyllis and Russell McDowell were playing guitar and piano, and might have been Charlie Steinhoff on upright bass. I can't remember. He's put a little band together, and he's playing this dance. And he said, "Bring your fiddle." So I'm 12 years old. It's great. So I'm playing drums, and he says, "Now we're going to have Scott play the fiddle with us." So the three of us played one or maybe two tunes together in three-part harmony. And, of course, the crowd loved that. And they said, do another one. Graham's like, "No, Scott's got to go back on the drums now." Like, that's the way he was just a lot of fun. And I have so many great laughs when I think about Graham.
Yeah, for sure. So you did that tour.
Yes.
And
that was 98. And then in 99, after Graham passed away, Barbara called me and said, "I'd like to do the show again. And I would like you to be the band leader, musical director, and help me with the show." And thus became a very long and brilliant partnership. Barb and I worked, tirelessly to improve the show. I had a lot of ideas. In those days, we were using the house sound rig and the house sound guy a lot of the time, and it was a very frustrating sound check setup. We would forward the plot of the stage and our requirements, and you know what it's like. Most of the time, nothing is there and ready when you get there, so you have to find it. They don't have it. They don't have enough mixes. They don't have enough monitors, so it's always a compromise. And the sound men don't really understand what a fiddle is supposed to sound like, so it was always an issue. And what should have been like a 20-minute sound check was like a 3 or 4 hour sound check, and you're beat before you even start the show. Yeah. So we corrected a lot of the things technical wise. We carried a sound man. We still used a house rig, but we carried a sound man, and we carried some monitors and some equipment of our own keyboard, and a few other things just for consistency. Yeah. And then we got to the point that I convinced Barb just to carry a whole rig, everything, sound and lights, and so we worked together to improve the show, and we had visuals. We had, we did a a spin-off show called Memories of Western Swingin' and Country Singin'. We had actual cactuses in the back of the stage, and I mean, this is still back in the early 2000s. So,
Yeah.
you know, we had a gobo that had our logo on, which was huge at those
Yeah.
days. It's not like we can put a projector up and display all these images and backdrops and everything. But we really worked hard to give a good show, and we had a 16-piece cast still in those days traveling. We'd go out 3 or 4 times a year for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time, all across the country, all the major soft seat theaters.
Yeah.
And so that really, I guess that was 98 is when that shift started between real estate and music, and it just kind of went the other way. And by the time I left Barb's show in 2005, late 2005, and I didn't know it at the time, but she was sick.
Oh.
She had some kind of a brain tumor.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was non-cancerous. But anyways, she passed away in early 2007. So she did do a show. Mark Sullivan came and played for her in 2006.
Yeah.
And she did, I think Sanderson Center, Johnny Forrest maybe came, and she did 1 or 2 shows there. But it was a very short run, like 3 or 4 shows.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much the end. When I left, it was pretty much the end. We had a very good parting.
Yeah.
She basically wanted me to go out on my own and said that I better do that. And so she kind of pushed me out of the nest. It's a long story, but Barb and I were great friends after that. And I talked to her just not very long before she passed away. But it was a really good time for, I think that's me.
Okay.
It's on vibrate, but it's just buzzing in the chair. Anyways, it was a lot of fun working with Barb over the years, and I learned a lot. I would not be able to do what I'm doing today had it not been for that experience.
Yeah.
And then that's in 2005, 2006, early 2006 is when I basically had to make it or break it on my own.
Yeah. So was that a scary proposition for you?
Absolutely. I had moved from, I had a really nice bungalow in Elora, and I had sold it and bought the house I'm in now, which was my grandfather had built, where my dad grew up.
Yeah.
And we had kept it after my grandmother died and had tenants in it. So it was okay, but it was a little run down. It needed it was a really nice house. All hardwood floors and, original wood trim.
Yeah.
And so because it had always been in the family, it was still original, but it needed to be done properly.
Yeah.
So I started, and I was just going to originally fix it up and then sell it and move on, get something else. But I realized that I kind of liked the house, and it was Nana's house when I was a kid, so we had a lot of memories.
Yeah.
So wiring, plumbing, windows, insulation, upper siding, aluminum trim, repointed the brick, did all the outside stone foundation, and then sidewalk in the front and the patio at the back and the doors, and then sewer line, and one thing after, what it's like, right? So I had still $30,000 or $40,000 of renovations committed on this house, and it's the end of 2005, and I left Barb's show, and I'm like, wait a second, I have no work, I have nothing.
Yeah.
I'm going to pay for this. So January 1st, I looked at my schedule, and I think I had 3 shows booked in Florida, and I had 2 or 3 sound gigs for the fiddle contest that I was still picking up after my dad had passed away. I carried on those for a few years, and that was it.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I guess I better get busy.
Yeah.
And my dad died in 2003 at Christmas time, and in, I guess, 2004 in the spring. Well, when my dad first passed away, we were doing Barb's show, and I think we were supposed to be in Lindsay, and that was the day of the funeral, so I missed the one show. And then the next day after the funeral was Tyler Beckett filled in for that show, and then the next day we did 2 shows at the Roxy in Owen Sound. Mm-hmm. So we went back on the tour, Mom and I both, and rather than traveling with the band, we drove on our own, went back and forth, because Mom had to deal with stuff, of course, after the funeral. And so we had lots of great conversations, my mom and I, and she said, I'd like to do a mission trip. And I said, okay. And she said, now that your dad's gone, she said, maybe I will. I might just do that. I said, okay. I said, I'm not in a position right in this point in my life that I would want to do that. But I said, I think that's great. And I said, I'd probably just play my fiddle somewhere and make some money for, Men for Missions or whatever group is going to build a school or a church or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, she goes, that's a good idea. She said, I wonder, maybe we should just take the whole band and do a show at the church. And then the proceeds will go to Men for Missions. They're going to Haiti or Nicaragua or someplace. She said, we should do that. So in the spring of 2004, we put a short tour of about 12 shows with a small 5-piece band, basically the band that I'd been using to play dances still.
Yeah.
And we went out and did a kind of a split the door deal with a bunch of churches and a few like service clubs and other charities all across southwestern Ontario and northern Ontario. We're up around Blind River and Sault Ste. Marie, in the Ottawa Valley as well. And it seemed to be really successful. And then, so we're still working with Barb.
Yeah.
This is 2004. And then in the fall, we did another dozen or so shows, and they seemed, on the same basis, they seemed to be really quite successful. We did a few more in 2005, and then 2006 comes along, and I have no shows with Barb now, and I've got to do something. So that's kind of how we got into this. It wasn't really by design, it was more by accident, but the word kind of got out that we were doing these fundraising shows, and we did a lot of gospel music, so the churches really liked it.
Yeah.
And the Split the Door was a great idea because they didn't have to commit a certain amount of money that if for some reason it was not successful, that they were going to be out money. They were always going to be gaining money of some kind, more if they did well and less if they didn't as well. But the risk was all on me.
Yeah.
And luckily I had played enough and my reputation preceded me that most people knew who I was in the fiddle world, that they'd say, oh yeah, we know who Scott Woods is. We'll go and see his show. And I was really, really lucky to have that start. And I had my mom on the piano still.
Yeah.
She was still touring. And Ivan Felker and Carl Watson were kind of my two dads after my dad passed away.
Yeah.
Carl had played with my dad way back when Dad was 12.
Yeah.
The very first band that he
Wow.
played with, the very first night that they played together, Carl was on the stage with my dad.
Jeez.
So, and he was still, he hadn't played with us, exclusively all the way through, of course, but still playing with us a lot.
Yeah.
And so we had Carl on bass and Ivan on guitar, and Ivan sang, and my brother was playing drums, Bruce. So it was a really easy show to take on the road because we all were like family.
Yeah.
So we have the Airstream trailers, so we'd put the gear in the back of my pickup and put the Airstream behind, and we'd go out, and if we needed to, we could stay overnight, and if not, we could just drive out in the truck and back. And it was a really good start.
Yeah.
And then 2006, I said, well, I'm going to make or break this. So we took the tour and we went across the country to the west. And then in the summertime, we went to the east and came back. And it kind of just has blossomed from there. I think there was maybe 85 shows I did that year. And the next year was like 120. And the next year was 160. And it got to the point that it was like up in the 160, 70 range. And I realized that was a little too many. So we try and keep it down to between 75 and 125, somewhere in there, around 100 usually.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that must have been a big job getting those shows and contacting those people and organizing the tours. And
yes,
people don't realize, they just think you show up and play and leave and that's it. But and even then, you're relying on, the internet to some degree, but I'm sure it still was a lot of picking up the phone and going at it that way.
Absolutely. I was on the phone a lot. And usually when I did call, I was successful because I could talk to the people, and, my sales background in real estate certainly helped. And I wasn't afraid to pick up the phone. I learned that early on, trying to get listings or trying to find somebody a house to buy or whatever. It was really no different, and I had a really good product to sell them because it was an easy fundraising effort for the church. And all the churches we're struggling for the most part. They all need a roof or a furnace or choir gowns, or they're going on a mission, or they want to donate it to the food bank. Or like there's always a need for more funds for the community. And so it was an easy sell for a lot of the time, but it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it became, I always say that's where my playing started to slide, because I became more, well, my friend used to say show business, if you look at it, show has 4 letters and business has 8 letters. So if you spend your efforts in those proportions, you're about a third of the time is actually building the show and practicing and performing.
Yeah.
And then the other 2/3 of your time is spent booking and, collecting the money and paying the band and doing the booking, bookkeeping, and all of the other business related items. And unfortunately, that's where most of my life has been ever since, because I'm basically being a promoter and an agent and a manager and a band leader. And I do all of our sound and lighting and any pretty Mickey Mouse technical stuff compared to the big shows, but it's something that we can pack up into the bus, take with us, and set up and tear down every day, and still show pretty good, Yeah. But it all has to be figured out, and so I'm spend most of my time doing that, and then just a little bit about playing and recording and performing.
Yeah, it changes, but on the other hand, if you didn't do that, you're back to the same choices again.
Yeah.
Sort of, playing till 2 a.m. And,
exactly.
Those things that you didn't like to do. So it must have been, like I mentioned, putting those tours together. When you started routing and decided to go, okay, now we're going to go across Canada, how did you decide where you're going to go and who you're going to call? And it's obviously you weren't going to this performing arts center or this place that already has a ticket situation set up, and you book it and it goes on sale. And primarily you were booking churches most of the way. Is that correct? Or in different?
It was everything. A lot of the time the churches liked it because they had the venue already.
Yeah.
So they really gravitated towards our show. A lot of our shows originally, I tried to get into the smaller theaters, like the 200 to 400 seat venues. That's my preference always, but sometimes a lot of the communities don't have that.
Yeah.
A lot of the times the church that's the biggest venue in the community. Sometimes it's at a Legion Hall or a community hall or something like that. So it would vary depending on the group and what was available in the community. And we'd play typically the smaller towns outside. We don't usually play Calgary with our show, but we'll play Airdrie or High River, on either side. And we do play Edmonton, but we quite often might play like Spruce Grove or Stoney or Morinville or one of the places just outside of the city. Same with Saskatoon. We play Humboldt.
Yeah.
We'll play Melfort or Prince Albert, but not Saskatoon.
Yeah.
So it was different. And so I basically went through everybody that I knew. That one of the things that we had done when I was with Barb is we started a mailing list, a fan club.
Oh, yeah.
And I managed that. It was my baby. So I had little forums, and we'd tell everybody, if you like fiddle music and you want to see our shows. So being on the road with Barb for so many years, we had played a lot of those towns before. I did have contacts, people that I had met and knew. And you know what it's like when you're on the road, there's people that treat you like family.
Yeah. We
We have a lady in Red Deer, and she brings us 2 pies to the show every year in Red Deer, has for 15 years.
Wow.
And and she's invited the whole band to her house for dinner, and like it's just like your family.
Yeah.
And I don't really know her, but she is just I do know her, but that's how I know her.
Mm-hmm.
And
Just a pie lady.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a cookie lady in Alexandria. We have a bun lady in Richmond, Quebec. And it just goes on, right? So I was able to call on some of those people and say, "Hey, who do you know? Do you go to church? Do you have a church? Do you know anybody that has an idea?" Bud and Ann Watson in Spruce Grove said, "Yeah, our church would be perfect for that."
Yeah.
And they helped me. So it was I was very, very fortunate to have that support from the fiddle community and our fans. And that's how I kind of got going. And then sometimes it didn't work out with that particular group, but because we were there, somebody else came. And then I was able to make another contact. Or a lot of the time people, after the first time, most of the time people would contact me and say, saw your show, loved it, would you come and play at our town, which is 50 miles the other side.
Yeah.
And then, so I might not have that one, but I might have another show. And so it was always more of a struggle to fit everybody in and not be too close to another town, geographically or time-wise, to make sure that everybody was going to be successful. And then as we continued, the show kind of grew to the point that we offered them lots of advice on how to market the show and how to get free publicity as much as possible and coming events. And we designed the posters. Originally, we designed them and then they had to copy them, but then we just copied them because sometimes they just make a photocopy in the machine at the office and it was black and white and crooked and, the tickets weren't very nice looking. So we said, okay, well, we'll make the tickets for you too. So we kind of are like a ticket master and a print shop and everything all in one. It's a really easy show again, that's why the churches love it, because it's basically out of the box. You just, when you get the package, everything you need to run the show and make it successful is there. And the ones that are very successful always comment about how great the package is.
Oh, yeah.
And the ones that don't do as well, I say, did you read the package? Well, no, actually, no, we didn't. We've done shows before, and I'm like, okay, well, that's why it didn't work.
Yeah.
The information's there if you use it.
Yeah, exactly. So you were traveling with Airstreams and that, and I know eventually you decided to get a bus. What was the decision around that?
Well, I'd always wanted a bus. It's always the dream. Like they say, happiest day of a musician is the day he gets his bus. And I guess the other side of that story is the second happiest day is the day he sells his bus. Yeah. So it was 2007. We were on the road with our Christmas tour. We had been in Florida. We still have Airstream trailers. I'm still very much involved with the Airstream Club. Yeah. My Airstream right now is sitting in Florida, and it's waiting for us to come back down there in a couple of weeks to the sunshine. We have some shows coming up down there.
Good.
And so I left the trailer there. My sister's going to use it after our tour is done, and because they have an Airstream as well. They're going to take my trailer and go off for a couple of weeks and pull my trailer home with my truck, and I'll have the bus there. But on the way home from Florida once in 2007, I stopped in Nashville. I'd been looking at buses for a while, and I made the mistake of looking at this one particular bus, the one that I ended up buying. Yeah. And it was really expensive. It was a beautiful coach. I looked at two, actually. One was Cher's old bus. It was a 99 H3 Prevost, and basically the same utility, but very glitzy. Yeah. High gloss cabinets and fancy design in the carpet and fancy paint job on the outside. And my mom was with me, and she looked at it and she's, well, it's a little over the top. Like, it's like you're really showing off. Yeah. And then we looked at the one that I ended up buying, and she said, now this is nice because it's just kind of silver. It's got a little thing on the side. The interior is just kind of plain. I mean, it's leather couches and big TV and everything, but it's just more utilitarian. It's more...
Yeah. Feels like home.
Yeah, it's more grassroots for what we're doing. We have travel with a dog, and we're in and out of the place with mud and snow, and 5 or 6 piece band, and people are on and off the bus all the time, and gear and everything else. So it's a working bus. It's not a motorhome for us. Yeah. So I couldn't afford it at the time. That was in the spring of 2007. At Christmas time in 2007, I got a call from the place in Nashville, and they had leased that bus out over the summer. And it was back on the lot, and they knew that I had looked at it, and so they had reduced the price. And the dollar had also come, it was like, I don't know, 20% on the something similar to what it is now, and it had come to almost par. Yeah. So that reduced the price significantly. It was about $100,000 difference from what it would have been had I bought it in the spring to what it was when I did make the deal. So we had a couple of days off on a Christmas tour, so I flew down to Nashville. And I went to another bus place, and I looked at a couple there. and then went to this one and looked at this bus again. And I made them an offer, and they accepted. I'm like, oh no, now what have I done? So I said, okay, well, I'll go home and I'll get the money transferred, and he transferred it to them, or wired it to them. And then at the end of our Christmas tour, I flew down. Actually, I guess I drove down with my brother-in-law in the truck. And they already paid for the bus. It was just a matter of picking it up. And then we drove it home. And I remember I had test driven it, but I had 10 or 20 miles under my belt, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I get in behind the wheel, and I'm like, okay, now I'm going home driving a bus. And I'd always driven trucks and pulled trailers and been driving tractors and everything since I was a kid. So I wasn't afraid to drive it, but it was a big machine. It's 50,000 pounds and 45 feet long and almost 13 feet tall. And so my brother-in-law, there's CB in my truck and a CB in the bus, of course. So he's behind me, and we're heading up 65 out of Nashville. And he said for the first 50 miles, the right side of the bus was over the white line. Like, I didn't realize how wide it was on that side. Yeah. It's 102 inches wide, 8.5 feet. And so he said after about 50 miles, then it was running about on the white line for about another 40 or 50 miles. And they said after that, you got it centered into the lane, and you had a foot or two on either side, depending on how wide the lane was, and it was good to go. So it took about 100 miles to kind of get used to how wide it was.
Yeah.
But I bit the bullet, and I said, if we're going to travel, this is and I looked at everything. I looked at motorhomes. I looked at configuring my Airstream trailer to accommodate the band better. And I think what the biggest challenge for me was having that darn pickup truck and putting the gear in the back. So you're jumping up to the tailgate of a 3/4 ton diesel pickup and slugging the gear in. So you got to set it up and then jump up and then pull it forward and then stack it and then jump down and set something else up and then jump up and then push it forward and stack it again. And it was just really hard on the back. And I did that several times, and it was so hot sometimes in the summertime in the back of that darn truck that you're sweating before you even get the gear unloaded to set up. It was just not very nice. So now we roll the gear up, and the bus is, a foot off the ground. We just tip the gear up and push it right in, and it's so much easier. It's great in most respects. The downfall, of course, with the bus is the cost to maintain and keep it running. And sometimes it's just so big, it's awkward to get in some places with trees, or they say just park over there on the grass, and it's too heavy, you can't, it'll sink. Yeah. It's a bit of a challenge at times as well. I'm always nervous if I'm going into a place that I'm not familiar with. Sometimes they have a back alley, and they say drive the bus down the back alley and then unload it, but then you can't get out, so you have to back all the way out.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why I've resisted pulling a trailer behind the bus. It would be easier with the gear than in the bays underneath, but anyway.
Yeah, it's harder getting in and out. And I mean, that's the thing with the bus too. It has a lot of great moments, but if you just want to whip down and, a few blocks and go somewhere, it's a big deal.
We're all in the bus. So we basically park at the venue, and at night we park at a Walmart or a truck stop or some empty parking lot somewhere. Yeah. And if there's some place close by that they can walk to, then the band can go and walk. And so if it's a Walmart, it's great because we do a lot of shopping, groceries, and we all eat on the bus typically. Yeah. And so they eat pretty healthy. Yeah. So they eat a lot of salads and, that kind of stuff. Whatever they do, cooking your own is still, even if you cook a hamburger, but you can buy the ground beef and make your own burgers and cook them on a George Foreman or something. It's still much healthier than going to the McDonald's or Burger King every day. Yeah. So that part's handy, but sometimes you're in the middle of nowhere, a little country church out in 10 miles out of town. There's nothing. So you got to be able to have enough food to do you for a day or two, just in case. Yeah. And getting water is always another issue to fill up the water tanks, because we sleep right on the bus. We shower on the bus. And so it's always lots of challenges and I don't know how many times I've changed the oil in the generator at midnight on pouring rain in a Walmart parking lot somewhere, but it needed to be done. And you're driving until 2:00 in the morning and you sleep for a few hours, and at 6 you're back behind the wheel again and driving again. And but it's life on the road. You get used to it, and at least you're sleeping in your own bed.
Yeah.
The dirt that's in the bed is your own.
Yeah.
And my dog travels with us, so it's like having your home with you all the time. So you go out to the bus, and I always say at the beginning of the tour, you look at that bus sitting there and it's pouring rain. You say, oh, that seems so nice. It's warm and cozy in there. It's going to feel so great to come into the bus. And after you've been on the road for 3 months with the same 4 or 5 guys, you look at the bus sit and you say, oh my God, I never want to go in that thing again. Get it away. Go. Let me spin around in the room without touching anything if I put my arms out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it is really the best way to travel though.
Yeah, and the amount of traveling you do, it makes perfect sense, and it looks good when you pull up. And, it's a good looking bus, and there's that whole aspect to it as well. It's a form of professionalism when you show up at a gig.
Terry Sumption was a good friend, and Terry always would watch that bus that he had, and he would say, "Well, boys, we're going to stop at the truck stop, and we're going to go into the Blue Beacon and get our bus washed, and we're going to shine her up and get your rags out, and we're going to go through and dry it off and pull up to the venue, and it looks nice." And I mean, it doesn't have to be a new bus. It's that you take pride in what you're doing. And for me, it's about that whole perspective for the audience, so that when they walk up, they see everything is positive. The bus is clean and it's parked nicely. It's even along the curb, and they walk in and the lights are on, and there's nice programs sitting there for them. There's posters. They know where they come. Everybody is there, ready, dressed. It's part of that whole presentation, so that the whole positive atmosphere is projected throughout their whole experience coming to the show.
Yeah, they've got a perception already that it's going to be good.
Yeah.
And before it even starts. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. So if you were to do it again now, say if you're had a choice to buy a bus again now, would you bite the bullet on that one, or would you look at something else?
I've toyed with the idea of selling the bus, and the one thing about the bus is that it ties me to having to play, because it's expensive. I can't keep it sitting in the driveway not running, and it's my own personal bus, so I don't lease it out. Nobody else uses it, so if I'm not on the road, it's sitting there, and if I go on a holiday, I take the Airstream, and the bus still sits there, so it's not like I can use it that way. And I have toyed with the idea of selling it, and then as soon as I get close to actually selling it, I've had it on the market a few times just to see.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, okay, so what would I get? So I always end up looking at other buses.
Oh yeah.
And then I'm like, well, that's dumb. I've already got a bus. I rebuilt the motor last year. So, the bus it's a 2000 and it's got 930,000 kilometers on it. But I'll tell you, she's a great running bus.
Yeah.
And so it needs constant maintenance. It's in the shop right now, getting serviced, ready to go to Florida.
Yeah.
And there's always something. You pretty much have to be a mechanic if you have any kind of a rig, an RV of any kind.
Yeah.
Because there's always something you have to fix. But I think at the end of the day, if you're going to be on the road, it really is the best way to. I would do it again for sure. Yeah. And even if I sold it, I'd probably buy another one.
Yeah, because there's not really many good alternatives, besides that. Now, you can get into a Sprinter.
Yeah.
I've seen a few people do that and put some bunks in there and pull a trailer.
That would be my next option probably if I wasn't on the road. And I did the math a couple of years ago. And for me, the magic number is 60 shows a year. Mm-hmm. If I do less than 60 shows, I could do it probably cheaper just with the cargo trailer in the back of my truck and hotels. Not including food and the comfort and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Just from the pure financial point of view. But once you get over 60 shows, then the bus starts to become more economical, because if you have a day off in the middle of Saskatchewan, you just park the bus.
Yeah.
You might run the generator, but that costs you like $20 in the day for diesel fuel. But that's it. But if you have a day off in Saskatchewan and you are in a hotel, now you've got 3 hotel rooms that are $100 or $120 a night.
Yeah.
Plus you got to eat, and you might get your breakfast for free, but you got to eat lunch and you got to eat your supper. And the band expect to get that covered one way or the other, either in pay or a per diem or something.
Yeah.
So it gets really expensive. And then there's the whole issue of everybody has to get up in the morning at the same time, and everybody has to have a shower before you leave the hotel. And then you have to stop and eat at the same place. And not everybody likes to eat the same stuff or at the same time.
Yeah.
So the bus gives you that freedom. Yeah. If they want to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't care. And if they want to sleep till noon, I don't care. As long as they're up in time to unload and set up, that's good. Mm-hmm. So everybody's got kind of their normal routine still. And there's TVs in the bunks, and there's TV in the front, and they can eat or sleep or whatever they want to do. A lot of them do other work. Lots of them do courses online while they're on the road with me. And the young guy we got, Leo, he's 14. He's homeschooled, so he's still taking courses, working on his homework all the time while we're going down the road, sitting at the table, doing his stuff. So it's a really good way. You couldn't do that in the back of a pickup truck, Five guys in a pickup truck and squished in the middle, and you can't have that. You'd basically be sitting there falling asleep. Yeah.
So how many years now have you been doing, I guess, since you started 06? So we're at 12, 13 years.
Yeah.
Doing the touring with the Scott Woods show. What do you see now for the next, do you look ahead 5, 6, 10 years ahead?
Well, I won't lie. I'm tired. I'm not burnt out, but I'm tired. I work hard, and our crowd is typically a more senior crowd, and it's tougher to get them out because they're getting on in age, and getting the younger seniors who are very mobile still. They don't always know who I am.
Yeah,
and they're not even necessarily fiddle or country music fans. So it's a tougher sell sometimes to keep the old time fiddle music that I play, and I'm not like a lot of the younger fiddlers who are really more into the Celtic scene where they're attracting young, college age, basically fiddle tunes with rock and roll band behind them atmosphere. I don't do that. I'm doing the old school, basically like Don Messer, and it is tough, and so I toy with the idea of slowing down. In which case, I might sell the bus and just go out and do a short run once a year.
Oh, yeah.
I guess ideally it would be to set up in a place like Branson, Missouri, or someplace, and then not have that travel expense and the tearing out down and setting up every day, and still be able to play.
Yeah.
But those gigs are hard to find, and you really know somebody to get in. So I'm not sure. At this point, I haven't given up. I've got still lots of energy to keep going. I've still got some ideas. And this year, we've got an exciting show starting, Fiddling Around, it's called. Every year we have a new show. And that's kind of what has kept us going, because the crowd know that what they saw last year won't be the same as what they're going to see this year. So I try and have different people on the stage with me. That helps.
Yeah.
And this year we've got Naomi Bristol joining us.
Great.
21 years old, Canada's yodeling cowgirl, of course. Mm-hmm. Very well known. She's got quite a following of her own on RFD TV. She's been recorded with Vince Gill and Bill Anderson and all these guys. Like, she's just a real pro already at her young age. So she'll be doing our whole tour with us in the spring and at Christmas time, and we're really excited to have Naomi joining us. And we've got Leo Stock, who is our step dancer, and he's also going to be playing drums this year.
Oh, good.
He sings, and he plays his fiddle, and he's a bit of a card. Does some comedy stuff, a bit of shtick on the stage.
Yeah.
And, of course, my sister Kendra and I on fiddle, and Kendra plays piano and accordion and whatever else she needs to do. She'll cover the bass with the piano, and then Steve Petico on guitar. So we've got lots of variety between Steve's guitar picking and Naomi's singing, and Leo step dancing, and of course my trick fiddling. Kendra does a mini pearl comedy thing. So we have a real variety show that we still have a completely different show this year than last year. We're really looking forward to that. And then our Christmas show, of course, coming up November and December. We're taking that show west again.
Yeah.
It's just the final few dates to confirm on our 2019 tour. I've been working at that, so it's it's a very busy year shaping up to be. We're heading to Florida shortly to do our it's actually our Fiddling Up a Storm show that we did last year.
Yeah.
Is the show we're doing in Florida. So it's kind of already built and ready to go. So we're still
Sounds busy.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like you're slowing down.
No, not really. No, I threatened to. I think I'm still just as busy. I'm just slower at doing it.
Yeah. Well, it is tiring. And I think you can easily get to the point where you feel like, yeah, I need a break, because there's a ton of work behind the scenes that nobody ever sees, and the stress of everything too. It can be very stressful knowing next time out. I tour a lot of shows, and you may have a great tour, but you don't know what the next tour is going to be.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean it's going to be gangbusters every time. And that's just the world of touring, and doing that no matter where you are. So you just gotta, like you said, you keep changing the show, and you keep doing whatever you can to get the people out, and but yet it is stressful, and it's a lot of work, and
even when the shows are successful, and you look out and the crowd is good, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily paying the bills. Like, the expenses are a big issue. And like last year, as an example, the rebuild on the bus, it's a 60 series Detroit engine, and it's one of the easier ones to rebuild than the Cat or the Cummins. And it was still, by the time there was a few extra things here and there, needed a 24-volt alternator and a few things that weren't necessarily part of the rebuild. Yeah. But still, the bill at the end of the day was like almost $48,000. Yeah. Like, that's a lot of fiddle playing before you even get back to where I started. And, going down the road, it's the same bus. It's the same, like everything. I don't have a new bus. I don't have a prettier bus. I don't have a fancier bus. The utility is, I'm still going down the road. There was a motor, and it was running, and I went down the road, and now I'm going down the road, and there's a motor, and it's running, and this expense is huge. And even regular yearly maintenance on the bus is between $10,000 and $15,000 or $18,000. Just normal oil changes and brakes and stuff that needs to be fixed and replaced. So it's the expenses that I really have to watch, and that's one of the big problems with a big show. I mean, there's only 5 or 6 of us on the stage usually, but still, the PA and the lights and the gear and the backdrop, and there's always, what it's like, there's always a cord that's broken. You got to buy another one. Yeah. And somebody drops a stand, and the mic stand breaks the tip off, and you have to go and buy another one, or it's bent, it won't go down. So duct tape fixes everything. Your buddy Red Green will tell you that. But so we're always fixing something, and it all has to be replaced, and you try hard to be careful with the stuff, but it's just wear and tear. You can't help it. It's just the cost of doing business. Yeah, and it's just the way that touring is, and you're the one that has to pay for it. Yeah. So I would love to get a gig like my guys have got, like somebody like me running the show and providing the bus and all of the gigs, and I just have to show up and set up the gear and play my little. And I mean, they work hard. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm really lucky. I had Bill Carruthers and Pete Sisk with me last year, and they worked hard. Yeah, setting the gear up every day, and we play pretty much every day when we're on the road. I never schedule a day off. And as I'm laying out the tour, there's always that 1 or 2 places that say we want a show, and then when push comes to shove, they say, "Oh, but not on that day. Our venue's not available, or we have something else that day. We can't do the show." So I end up with nothing, just because of the way it is. And so I only have a day off if that happens, or if I have a scheduled drive day. But otherwise, we're working every single day, and even they can sleep in their bunks. It's tough on them as well, and but at least that's the end of their worry. They don't have to sit and count bums in the seats and say, "Are we making money today or not?" I don't know. They're making money anyways. They're getting paid. They know they're going to get paid regardless. And it's hard to do. I mean, it's hard to separate when you're doing a show too, because you still have to go out after driving there and setting up and getting everything ready. And then you have to be the front of the show. And then you have to make sure you're not looking out thinking about,
you know, because as the front, you're thinking about all these extra things that that, you know, maybe the people behind you don't have to think about.
Right.
And then you have to make sure you keep. That's my biggest thing. If you know, I'm doing a show and I'm part of the lead, you know, I knows everything that's going on. So
Exactly.
I can hear the PA. I can see what's happening with the lighting. I can see with this. And if it's not working the way I'd want it to be going, then that affects what I'm going to do as the entertainer. So yeah, you try not to let it happen, but it's when you're super aware of everything and you've got all these other responsibilities, it's hard to kind of just shut things off.
Anybody that knows you
showtime.
can see it on your face for sure.
Yeah.
And you try and still keep smiling, but you're really gritting your teeth saying, why are those lights not right? I said how I want those lights and now they're not right.
Yeah.
I know exactly what that's like. And you're right. It's so tough to still put your smile on and go out and tell your jokes and play the show and remember how you're supposed to start the tune and the tempo and the feel and all of that stuff has to be, for me, it becomes second nature. Like, it's very rare that I guess I go back to what we started talking about. I thank my parents for that classical background, that technique, because my fingers inherently just play the tune. Once the tune starts, it just comes from my heart or my head or whatever through my fingers, and it happens. But meanwhile, I'm thinking, okay, after this tune, I tell this joke and then this tune, but wait, we changed the key of that one, so I have to do that. And wait, why is that guy, why is he leaning against the light switch? He's not going to turn those lights on, is he? Why is he doing that? And I mean, you're looking at all of this stuff.
But you're still doing
But yet your fingers are still working. You're still playing the tune, and it's still good. Like, it's not like you're not in the moment. It's just an instinctive, it's very natural way of playing that way.
Yeah, I think I've said before, I don't know how many times I've been on stage and you played a song and maybe I played the solo and something and you're 3/4 way through the song and you just come back to reality from whatever you were doing. And you just think to yourself, what did I just play? I don't remember anything that just happened. And obviously no one's looking at me strange or there's nothing going on. So it must have been okay.
Yeah.
But it becomes so automatic that you're able to drift off. And it's not some in fantasy land. I'm usually thinking something important that's going on, or I think, you know, like you said, you got to think about what's going to happen in the next song, or is, you know, you look over and something's not working right. So I wonder why that's happening over there. And then all of a sudden you've just played a solo. You have no idea you just did it.
For years, I did a lot of house fiddle gigs at the competitions for square dancing and step dancing, a lot of step dancing. Yeah. And of course, it's all, it's 32 bars of a clog, 48 bars of a jig, and then 96 bars of a reel, typically for a competition set. Yeah. And so sometimes when you play clog, jig, and reel, clog, jig, and reel, clog, jig, and reel over and over and over again, you get tired. And then at some point, so some of these classes, there's 30 or 40 contestants in a row. Wow. You might have to play for almost all of them. Sometimes it's rare that somebody else would come up and bring their own fiddler. So sometimes I remember looking at my mom, you know, you play A, A, B, B, A, A of the jig, and you're on the A part of the jig, ready to go into the reel, but you're thinking to yourself, is this the first A or is this the second A? Is it time to switch to the reel or not? And you're playing, so you can't say what you're actually thinking, but I would look over at my mom with this kind of panic look on my face, and she knew what I was thinking, and I would say, yes or no? And if she said yes, then okay, it must be the second A, we're going into the reel. And if she said no, then okay, it's the first A, we have to do it again, we have to repeat it, and then we go into the... And I think in all those years, it only happened maybe 2 or 3 times that I guessed and I was wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And I went into the reel and it was too soon, or I didn't go into the reel and I should have. And so then I had to stop, and it was my fault, so the dancer got to re-dance. Right. But that was so rare, and I felt awful. Like in, I don't know.
It's so easy to do, though.
25 years of playing for step dancers, that happened 2 or 3 times. It's not that bad, but at the same time, it's their competition and they're relying on me. But I just got tired, and I just physically, mentally, I was drained. And so it's kind of that situation where you think, you know, what am I doing?
It was funny because every once in a while, it depends on the fiddle tune I'm doing in our family show, we lock all of our lighting and visuals and everything to the computer. So, and it sits by the drummer. So I'll be, you know, playing whatever fiddle tune and playing away. And I'll same thing. I'll be like, gosh, how many times am I supposed to be playing this thing? Because I got to end it at the right time to go with everything else.
Yeah.
And I just look over everyone else, and they're all relying on me to take them in to the ending too, because you just set it up and we just finish up. So I've gotten really good at just kind of leaning back and taking a look at the screen, and I know my program so well, and I can read waveforms from like a mile away, and I can see all the I'll see all the markers that I've got set up for where the end of the song's supposed to be, and I'll just look back and say, nope, I got to play one more time.
Yep, there you go.
And it's just get it done. It's like, but sometimes I just when you get in a situation like that, you have to just kind of, you just can't end whenever you want. You have to, and that's what happens when you see a lot of big shows now. You see big touring shows. If you want to take another solo, you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, all the lighting, everything you're watching is all locked into a computer.
Yes.
And if you miss coming in after the intro of the song, the band doesn't vamp and wait for you to come in.
No.
They just keep playing, and you got to catch up.
Yep. They've already started the progression of the chords, and you just have to miss a verse and then come in or jump in the middle, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. Well, it's been a great chat. We learned a lot, and I know you've got a great tour this year. So you're heading down to Florida in March?
Yes.
And then when does the new tour start?
The new tour is Fiddling Around, and it starts on the 26th of April. So we'll go into rehearsals the few days before that. We always do a dress rehearsal before our tour starts as well.
Yeah.
Usually at one of the local nursing homes. We set up the whole show and everything, projection and lights, and they get a real sense of what we're doing. And it's more for us. It's much more than we need to play in the nursing home. But I explained to them this is as much for us as it is for them, so that we make sure that the gear actually works the way it's supposed to, and that everybody knows what gear is what. And some of it doesn't. Some of the gear doesn't come out until we actually unload the cases.
Yeah.
Like the mic stands. I don't realize somebody broke one last time it was out, and so we have to find that out at dress rehearsal. So things like that. And so we start on the 26th of April, and we play basically every night until there might be a handful of dates, 3 or 4 or 5 dates that are either drive days or days off. Until the 15th, I think, of June, we're back in Ontario. So we started in Ontario, swing into Quebec quickly, and then back, and then head out to Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC. Not quite to the coast. I think we're going to be as far west as Abbotsford. Yeah. And then circle back. And so that takes us to the 15th of June. We're back in Ontario by then. And then our Christmas tour does basically the same routine. Yeah. I think there's 47 or 8 shows in the first run. And then at Christmas time, about 41 or so shows, I think, in 5 provinces in 42 days or something.
Yeah. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a busy run, and we were talking about the stuff that people don't see. They don't see the 6 or 8 hours drive you did in the morning, and then the 2 hours of setting up, and then the sound check and EQing the room and adjusting the lights, focusing the lights, and adjusting the projection. We have GoPro cameras on the stage, so they all have to be adjusted, and then everybody has to get in and out of the shower, and then we all have to eat. And then we all get changed. And some days we have to stop and do some laundry because our show clothes need to be laundered when we're on the road for that long, of course. And then we are back in at 6 o'clock typically for a 7 o'clock show. And we meet the audience as they're coming in. And I usually sneak off backstage, and I'm going back to my roots, and I'm playing all that Shradiak and scales and exercises to warm up. Not only my physical part, my left hand, especially the violin, but also it's kind of a mental, I just kind of like almost meditation. Yeah. I think to myself, where am I at, and what is going to happen today, what's different, who might see in the audience, just in case, so that I'm kind of prepared to say something if I do see somebody, and all of the things that need to happen so that I'm ready to be that front man after all of those things. And then we do our show, and then we go out and we sign autographs and sell CDs and meet the folks and shake hands, and then we have to go change and then pack all that gear up at the end, load the bus. Hopefully there's not stairs, but sometimes we have to go up and down stairs.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we drive another 2-3 hours. Sometimes we were able to park, right there. If it's only a couple hours to the next venue, we usually park somewhere close to that one, and then drive in the morning. But it's a long day, and you do that day after day, and a week is not so bad. 2 weeks, anybody can handle it. 3 weeks is pushing it.
Yeah.
But you start talking 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks every day. It's
a
tiring.
grind. Yeah.
If you ever get sick, then you're beat.
Yeah.
Like especially me, because I don't get a chance to rest.
Yeah.
And I do all the driving. So it's, even you're sitting there, you're not doing much, you're just driving.
Well, tiring. It's very tiring.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's even the day off, travel day is a work day.
For me, it is. Yeah. And even the band, they can't go and do something. They can't go and do laundry or go and shop or go out and explore. And people often say, "Oh, did you see the museum? Did you get a chance to go and check out the nice trail and the mountains?" And I'm like, no, sorry, don't have time.
Yeah.
We saw it on the highway. Looked good.
Yeah.
At 60 miles an hour.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, thanks for dropping in. Good luck on the tour.
Thank you.
And hope we get a chance to see one of the new shows if we're close enough and I'm able to get there. And good luck, and we should do this again. What's the best way for people to reach out and find you via the interwebs?
Well, the scottwoods.ca is our website, and it has our schedule, and it has a little sample of, we've got about 24th album we're working on right now. Wow. It'll be out before our tour starts in April. Yeah. And so there's a little sample of at least one part tune of each of the albums. And of course, we're on Facebook as well, Scott Woods and Scott Woods Band. And we're trying to get caught up with some of that social media stuff. I'm not very adept at all of the ways of the new world of marketing, but I've got Janet McGlynn helping me in London, and she does a great job with not only my graphics and my website and all of that stuff, but she's really good at all of that. So she's helping us. But scottwoods.ca will tell you all the information, where we're playing, how to get tickets. We have a toll-free number, 1-855-SCOTT-WOODS, that you can call and get information on where we're playing and how to get tickets. And you can actually buy your tickets with a credit card, and they'll be held at the door. It's my sister Kendra that you'll talk to probably, and she can set you straight about where we're going to be and how to get there and all of that stuff.
Perfect. Well, good luck, and we'll talk to you real soon. Thanks again.
Thank you.